this move to make things friendlier, user friendly, that is, it's a double edged sword. Technology has become so user friendly that yes, people are now content creators, they're influencers without needing to be technologists, engineers, or analysts. And it is bittersweet.
Thanks to the science of music, you don't need musical talent to make great music. Just listen. I created that just by pressing a button. Why work hard on difficult compositions when a machine can make music better than you've ever dreamed of?
Pro AV at the National Association of Broadcasters, ADI by Snap One, and experiencing AV. All that and more next on AV Week. This is AV Week, episode 661, recorded Friday, April 19th, 2024. AV Experiences. This is AV Week, the weekly wrap-up of the biggest audiovisual news and information we have gathered. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to discuss the news and information we have gathered this week. First and foremost, Willie Franklin. I'm just going to call Willie the AV sage from now on because he's wise. He's been around the industry a while. So how are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, Tim. I thank you. I thank you for that crown. That is wonderful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Also with us the most interesting Tim in the AV industry, Timothy Troast from Legrand AV. How are you, sir?
You're too kind, Mr. Albright. Too kind. Thank you.
Last but not least, a young man that first time here, so you two be nice to him, Chris Merrill from Panasonic. How are you, sir?
Good, and looking forward to a little leniency here. That's great.
Yeah, they're especially Troast. Troast is kind of mean sometimes. I'm just
And it's Friday, so anything's possible.
Friday. First story of the week. Speaking of Friday, NAB 2024. NAB took place this week in Las Vegas. The National Association of Broadcasters has reported registered attendance of over 61,000 people for the 24 show, marking a slight decrease from the previous year's 65,000 plus attendees, but a significant increase from the 52,000 attendees in 2022. The industry was still kind of recovering from the pandemic. According to NAB, 54% of registered attendees were first-time visitors to the show. The event featured nearly 1,300 exhibitors from 41 countries, showcasing products and technologies in the broadcast industry as well as Pro AV. The show has also increasingly become an audiovisual centric show. Virtual sets, productions, AV over IP, and conferencing cameras shown. Mr. Troast, we're going to start with you on this. Coming out of Vegas, coming out of NAB, and quite frankly, ahead of 6 weeks, I think, 49 days from this recording, before we head back to Vegas for InfoComm. What are some of the things that happened at NAB that the end user IT managers should be aware of coming out of NAB this week?
Well, I didn't go to NAB this year, but I've been many a time, so I'm going to assume it was pretty consistent. And I think the evolution of the technology is such that end users have access to more capabilities without pulling in expertise and specialists. We're seeing a surge of live events happen in corporate America, and in-house capabilities are able to support it without third-party resources and teams. So it's helping to drive employee communication, drive engagement across the enterprise, especially multi-site enterprise. And I think that's why we're seeing this blending of audience from the pure broadcast space that was the networks and the movie studios into more adjacencies in lighter broadcast applications, House of Worship, etc.
Willie, one of your last projects at Outerbind was to create a studio, right? And a little bit to Troast's point there, more and more higher education facilities, more and more corporate are crafting and installing their own production studios, right? And it can be anything under the sun. Regardless, what they're putting in their facilities would have been and probably still should be labeled a production studio, right? 20 years ago, we would have called it a TV studio, right? But today we're going to call it virtual production, or we're going to call it corporate communications. There are multiple cameras, there are lights, there are microphones. It's a freaking production studio. So talk about that move for the folks that are managing these systems, you're responsible for the traditional AV in classrooms, but you're also responsible for this piece over here. How are those tech managers, I guess, evolving and showing up to this new challenge of incorporating the broadcast AV into their pro AV spaces?
Tim, that's a very good question. Thank you for phrasing it in that way. Coming from the higher ed environment, the tech managers are really looking for content creators. We have really seen a scale back in people having a high degree of specialty when it comes to technology, particularly broadcast technology. We'll bring in a couple of folks from the outside, but I know my former employer, we did a lot of stuff in-house. So we have the talent in-house and we have the creative energy in-house. I see that growing, and it seems to be evident when we look at the uptick of attendees at this year's NAB event. There's so much imagination happening, whether it's something that we pursue in a one-button recording studio or a couple of set-aside podcast studio. People can go in and create their own digital media to push across campus for digital signage. There's so much happening. And what is also a reality is the fact that a lot of these end users really don't have deep technology skills, right? They have creative energies, they understand what button to push, how to adjust the microphones and lighting. But if you ask them granular detail with regards to bandwidth, key lighting, frequency response, and pickup patterns of microphones, they would be completely lost. So content creation really is where it's at.
Chris, from a manufacturer standpoint, you've watched this show over the last however many years. How has it morphed into, while it's incorporating what I would call some of the corporate or pro AV elements to it? And it can be anything from Keros, right, which is a Panasonic product, or PTZ cameras that you can bring in from any part of the world, right, using the internet, to NDI, right, or Dante, or some of these elements and some of these production elements that are allowing for both remote production as well as higher end conferencing.
Yeah, you started out by just emphasizing the number of first time attendees, and that highlights. We had a little deeper discussion with NAB executives, and they didn't really distinguish in that number of first time attendees from people who normally attend and first time attendees who are actually new companies, net new. But they're absolutely looking well beyond the broadcast in order to bring those viewers. And from a vendor standpoint, that really means, just as Willie was pointing out, we've got to make things easier and simpler. One of the things that was probably every major manufacturer at the show announced something that was more of a software-defined production platform, right? And as a result, then everybody is trying to take those user interfaces and make them much more familiar to someone who's used to other digital tools, as opposed to the traditional, more hardware-centric kinds of interfaces. And as a result, then we're able to also add a lot of automation and sort of a layer of abstraction from what's happening behind the scenes. And again, to Willie's point, they don't actually have to know how it works because we're trying to implement those user interfaces that allow them to just start rather than having to go through hours of training and development.
So you can be an influencer as opposed to engineer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and you overlay artificial intelligence on this and the capabilities with controlling cameras, locking in people, devices. It just further lowers the threshold to be able to do high quality broadcast.
Very true.
Well, and something Chris said there as well is the software side. And I think I was on a podcast with Ryan Gray. I had my member and had a really good podcast, not because he had me on. He has a good podcast regardless of me. But I made the statement that if you are in the AV space, and let's just call it the technology space, whether it's cameras or switchers or conferencing, and you don't have a software element, you are missing the boat. You are being discounted in today's day and age. Absolutely.
This move to make things friendlier, user-friendly, that is, it's a double-edged sword because in the broadcast industry, I'll slow down my thinking and my mouth will catch up. So in the broadcast industry, quality mattered, and quality still matters, right? With regards to image, video, audio, the whole kit and caboodle. But what also matters is rating. So what I've seen in the last 5 to 8, maybe 10 years is the increase to which broadcasters are putting crappy video on and calling it legitimate cinematography, if you will. A simple case in point would be someone with a terrible cell phone video of what they swear is a funnel cloud touching down, and it's basically just dust blowing around their backyard. So I know I'm going beyond the target of the conversation, but what I'm getting at is technology has become so user-friendly that, yes, people are now content creators, they're influencers without needing to be technologists, engineers, or analysts. And it is bittersweet. On one hand, the automation that we're seeing and have at our fingertips allow for our devices to do amazing things without gobbling up a whole lot of energy. Bounce back 10 years ago, if you're out shooting video, particularly if you were portable in any sense, you would probably have 50 pounds of batteries with you just to keep that content gathering process alive. So amazing evolution of technology.
And I'll give you one better than that, Willie. I was at Enterprise Connect 2 or 3 weeks ago, right? This is the first time we've ever done this for AVNation. So you can yell at me and tell me it's horrible. You can say, oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that. I used a cell phone for our booth tours for the very first time. I was relatively impressed with the simplicity. And I used a secondary mic system, a company called DJI. Not a sponsor, just it's a pretty good microphone. And yeah, very, very impressed with the simplicity and the quality, quite frankly. And it was a cell phone that I just got from it was an iPhone. I don't know if anybody cares about that, but that's what we used. Infocom is a whole different animal. It's a different workflow. It's a different process, but we tried something out for the first time and something that was not available 15 years ago.
There's the kind of the flip side of that. Yeah, you certainly can use consumer technology in order to capture the information. There's a lot of applications where people are wanting to have the video idea of communication, a classroom, a boardroom, whatever, right? Where that cell phone just doesn't work because you don't have the right angles, all of those kinds of things. And so to be able to build some of that software smarts we were talking about into, say, a PTZ camera or something else like that, that allows you actually, without any experience, to still get those angles, to have it track the speaker, to zoom in when you need to. Those are still important tools, which then allow someone who doesn't have any experience to actually do a quality production, because the quality still matters. People do judge that, and that's how you represent your brand. So it's important that you maintain that.
Next story comes to us from actually Tokyo, Japan. Panasonic Connect has announced their projection system has been selected to power the world's largest permanent projection mapping display at the Tokyo Metropolitan Government Building in Shinjuku. The display, certified by Guinness World Records, commenced operation on February 25th, 2024, and aims to revitalize the nighttime economy through diverse content programming. Panasonic's AquaSign digital signage solution, along with high brightness projectors and an immersive sound system, enables cloud-based remote management and content updates. Willie, I'll start with you on this. Besides the fact that it was a Guinness Book of World Records, and if you see him at Infocom, I'll tell you a really horrible story about me in the Guinness Book of World Records. But how do we create more of these, right? How do we get more of these things that it's the experiential part, right? Avixa, a number of years ago when they went from Infocom to Avixa, they wanted to emphasize the experience, the AV experience, right? That's what this is, right? Whether it's this, whether it's the projection mapping at ISE that Mike Blackman and his team are doing a phenomenal job, right? Whether it's the Sphere, it's these high profile things that get people who don't understand that we don't, fix VCRs in AV, but we do some really cool things. How do we create more of these and get the the IT managers and the decision makers to buy in on stuff like this?
That's a big question. I'll first give a shout out and a tremendous smile to Panasonic. For several years ago, I bought a couple of Panasonic projectors. Loved them so much that as I traveled to New Jersey to visit a relative, my sister, I gave her one so she could entertain the grandkids in the backyard with movie night around the pool. Now, to get back to your question, I want to say if you build it, they will come. It is incredibly impressive. I think for me, that edge blending technology, showcasing what can be done with projection mapping, allows companies to be agile in their advertising approaches. Having managed our campus digital signage environment, knowing how quickly we can kind of flip the script and put new content up, but to go into a space or to stand outside of a space or create a whole canvas that doesn't really exist is an amazing level of creativity. And that opens up this, I'll call it a wormhole for artists to do amazing things. The level of creativity, the energy to see showcased on a building structure, on the side of a bridge, within the hallway of an auditorium. I visited, and I may have mentioned on a previous conversation, the immersive display. I'm going to forget the artist's name now. That technology can't help but energize the viewer, and it leaves you asking why and how. Why didn't we do this sooner? And how can we get this? So when it comes to selling it to tech managers, I think if you build it, they will come. It's an expensive venture. It takes a lot of energy, but it also removes one of the barriers to entry, and that is having specialized individuals that are there to stage it, to calibrate it, to run it, to change it, to have an environment like that that can be so easily remote managed is like a win-win. You kind of set it and forget it, so to speak. I know I'm borrowing that tagline from another agency.
Chris, same kind of question is, besides the fact that it was Panasonic, and I said this before we started recording, that I would have picked this story whether Chris was on because I love projection mapping. How do we create more of these?
I agree totally with Willie, but I think I'd take it one step further. Most of the things that you referenced are things that for me are still sort of passive experiences. They're amazing. You can go, you could see it, but to take it one step further and to allow you to do something that then changes that environment, whether that's a golf simulator, or whether you're using different kinds of screens like smoke or mist, other kinds of things, tracking the individuals inside and having the content respond to what they're doing. When you turn this into, you take that imagination another level, not only are you putting them in an environment that they're seeing it both in their mind, but then as they begin to interact with it, it responds, is a way of really elevating that experience for them.
Mr. Troast, you'll have the last word on this one. How do we create more of these experiences and, quite frankly, bring more people into the industry? Because that's kind of my long game here is the more you can excite people with stuff like this, the more people that would be attracted and go, I want to do stuff like that.
Yeah, right. It's overcoming some of the historical stigma for what it means to be an AV and getting people the opportunity. I mean, I'll agree with Willie. Just with my product development background, all too often I've had to create business cases to develop new products for executives to sign off on funding. And they're asking, what problem are you trying to solve? And here's a situation where you introduce technology and people find a use for it. I think LG launched a laptop, a couple months ago that had a transparent screen, and everyone was like, why would you create this? I don't understand how you would use it. But I can guarantee you there's hundreds, if not thousands of people out there right now figuring out a use for that laptop. And they're going to be having a podcast 365 days in the future saying, oh my God, this is amazing. So I think it comes down to taking a chance And these experiences that we're talking about here, you'd have to show up to Disney World or some other fantasy land to get a chance to experience projection mapping and think about Logitech's Project Ghost and these sort of creative ways of using AV to create differential experiences. And companies need to take a chance. It's really a marketing thing, right? It's how do you attract people to your environment, sell your brand, and use technology in a differentiated way to do so.
Final story is a $1.4 billion acquisition. Just because I get to say 1.4 billion. And no, it's not an integrator. Resideo Technologies has announced a definitive agreement to acquire Snap One Holdings for $1.4 billion. The acquisition, which is expected to close in the second half of 2024, will integrate Snap One into Resideo's ADI Global. Pause. I did the same story in ResiWeek from a different angle, and I said ADI bought Snap One. Technically and legally, Resideo bought Snap One. But Resideo owns ADI, and Snap One's going to be part of ADI. All right, so that's my mea culpa on that. They did so according to the release to create a strong position in security, audiovisual, and smart living technology distribution for residential and commercial markets. That's where we're headed. The combined company is expected to drive increased value for integrators and financial returns through an expanded selection of proprietary products, extensive third-party supplier relationships, and proven omni-channel reach. Troast, from your standpoint, what does this do to the industry? What does this do to the Pro AV market and to the end users that are using these products on a daily basis?
I might use a different word than due to the industry, but we're watching acquisitions happen all around. And why are there acquisitions in the AV space? Because it's still profitable, right? We sit in between electrical and IT. Both of those have heavily been commoditized, and AV offers those specialty distributors a different profit stream. Now, when we look at these organizations, I start to look at and question what's the minimum revenue size and threshold can you be at in order to leverage your fixed cost structure and compete in a distribution model. Cinex is 60 billion. You look at a Wesco, they're 20 billion. When I looked at the numbers for ADI or Resideo and Snap One, now you're talking about a $4.5 billion organization. So yeah, it's with a B, but look at the order of magnitude that they're competing against. So
are we splitting hairs over how many billions you need?
Maybe that's what we're learning, right? And look at Cedia. I think there's another underlying question here to your comment about organizations are trying to get into commercial. And this is our story, but the story they spun in the press release was all about smart living is here. But it was Snap One and Savant that by and large made their livings off of the Cedia marketplace.
100%.
Now it's Savant. And everybody else that really competes in Cedia, it's an opportunistic or a secondary business venture to a primary business that is in another channel. So I'm looking at this as what does this mean for the Cedia community and that marketplace, and what does it take to compete there?
Well, the other side of that, though, is ADI's primary business has been security, right? So they're trying to increase their market share both on the Cedia side and the Pro AV side too, right? So they've got plenty of money over on the security side. Now they're trying to increase, and quite frankly, grow into, a relatively new market compared to how long they've been in security.
Well, and I think you look at the data from a CE Pro or other place, roughly 30% of the sales of a residential integrator comes from commercial anyway, right? So if you're doing business in a residential integrator, you're effectively in commercial some way, shape, or form.
I actually just wrote another piece about Resi-mercial that I'll get yelled at for.
Any of these deals that we look at, absolutely, that connected environment that we live in is coming. I mean, just coming back from NAB, I went to connect in at my hotel room, and I could connect to the refrigerator and the microwave. And there were like 3 other devices in my room that I could have connected to, but I was just looking for the Wi-Fi. Those networks are around me. But the reality is, every one of those is just a minuscule portion of revenue. And if I, as a manufacturer, because my costs are still pretty high, I just have to hit volume, right? And so I think you'll see more of these deals as they go on, as people try to get a volume that's large enough to sustain the back end they have to have in place in order to make that happen.
Scale is critical, to your point, and to get the technology to perform reliably, consistently, you can't do that on a shoestring budget. I mean, look at all the acquisitions Snap did to get to that point, to be $1 billion enterprise, and they were struggling to make it all work. And what I think also is interesting about this is to your point, Tim, on the Honeywell kind of portion, the security portion of it, is now you've got access to a consumer portion of that business, and they can afford to put some more leverage, some more engineers over it, and maybe strengthen up that technology portfolio that Snap became famous for.
Willie, I'm going to ask you a question that I'm going to get in trouble for, and that's okay.
Okay.
Both of these companies, ADI and Snap One, have local offices. They have local stores. Now, they're for dealers, right? Don't misunderstand the question here. If I'm a dealer, I can walk into Snap One, I can walk into ADI, and I can get my hands on product, right? I can touch it, I can feel it, I can take it away and pay for it and whatever. More and more educators, more and more higher ed folks, not necessarily looking to do it themselves. There are some of those, right? And there are certainly qualified in-house integrators that want to get their own product. But they're looking more than that. They're looking to educate themselves. And not everybody's going to get to go to Infocom, right? Infocom last year was about 31,000, 32,000. Oh, this is off the top of my head. And 30% were higher ed. There's a whole lot more folks that didn't go, right? What could something like this do for those folks who's looking to educate themselves on the latest product without having a roadshow, without having something local? Because again, I live in St. Louis. St. Louis is no longer an NFL city, but it's also not, it's not a major market. I love my folks here in St. Louis, but when I was on the radio 20 years ago, we were a top 20 market. We are no longer that. So there's no road shows here. There's no E4, right? There's no Alamo E4.
Yeah. It's coming back soon.
Yeah, it's not. But is something like this, interesting to education, to higher ed folks who are looking to get their hands on stuff? And would this, lend itself to a potential education play from ADI to say, look, end users, come in, right? We'll educate you. We'll show you the latest, greatest things. Not going to sell you anything, right? We're still a dealer channel player, but we'll show you whatever we got.
Absolutely. It's a complex piece. I'll leave my integrator hat off. Just talk from the end user perspective, as well as looking at that buyout or buy-in. For me, this is a huge win, if for no other reason, the fact that I often enjoyed walking in through the door of a business, seeing what they had to offer, having the opportunity to talk with an engineering team, having the opportunity to talk with an integration team, having the opportunity to talk with a software development team, all in one house. So when we pull those entities together, in some regards, we get that because it becomes cheaper to buy it versus building it. I can't afford to build a whole new team and have several units, but I can buy into what already exists and strengthen my resolve or strengthen my market share from that perspective. So from the higher ed side of things, from the educational side of things, it's a real world experience for me and for my former team when we would visit our distributors and essentially have almost everything we needed answered right there in one visit. We didn't have to reach out to a remote office or another agency because some of our team were only concerned with the network interface protocols of said product, right? And you have people right there in that office that can answer that. Others were only interested in how can I make this pretty? In other words, what buttons do I push to make it happen and make my students know that they're loved and cared for and well educated because I'm a talented educator, right? So having that all in-house is absolutely wonderful. Personally, I think it's a smart move, whether it's $1 billion or more. That is a big number, 1.4.
Yeah, it's big. And we can discuss how many billions is even bigger. All right. Thank you guys so much. Mr. Timothy Troast, thank you, sir. How do people connect with you or Legrand AV?
Yeah, check us out, legrandav.com. You can find me on the socials at Timothy Troast.
Like I said, the most interesting Tim in the AV industry. Mr. Willie Franklin, thank you, sir. How do people connect with you?
Well, Willie Franklin is, all over the place with regards to projects and consulting. I can easily be reached at Franklin DJ and Event Services at gmail.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. Just look for Willie Franklin.
All right, very good. Mr. Merrill, thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. How do people connect with you or Panasonic?
Pleasure to be here. And actually, it's Panasonic.com. That's the best way to reach us. So pretty straightforward.
For me, for Tim Albright, do not follow me anywhere at any time. Don't do it. It's not very interesting. But go by the website if you would, please. AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. You'll find this program and a host of others. Brand spanking new State of Control actually landed today that we are recording this. So check that out. EdTech as well as the Women in AV. Also check out our coverage of Infocom, which starts on May 6th. May 6th is when our coverage of Infocom starts. We've got a bunch of previews coming down the pipeline. And then, of course, we'll be there the 12th through the 14th of June in Las Vegas, Nevada. All that and more at AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. That's all the time we have for AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AV Nation.
This is AV Nation.